Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, May 9th, 2013. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Gordon Strong, president of the Beer Judge Certification Program and author of Brewing Better Beer, joins us with tips on entering and judging competitions. If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can follow me on Twitter. My username is Basic Brewing, all one word. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. We have a Basic Brewing Radio and Basic Brewing Video page on Facebook as well at facebook.com/basicbrewing. We are on Google Plus, too. You can find our little community on Google Plus by searching for Basic Brewing. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. You know how it works. Whenever you think of shopping on Amazon, don't go to Amazon first. Come to our site first, basicbrewing.com. Click on our associate link, which has the Amazon logo on it. That will take you to Amazon. You can shop to your heart's content. It won't cost you any extra, and you'll be helping us to bring you this show. We greatly appreciate your support. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site, too. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes and our Android app on Amazon.com. We're in the BlackBerry podcast directory, and we're on Stitcher, and we're on the Windows Phone directory, too. Check out our Brewer's Logbook at basicbrewingshop.com. In the front is a calendar that you can use to track your fermentations and plan your brews. And, say it with me, the good thing about the calendar is that it is blank. So you have a full year of calendar pages no matter when you start your brewing year, and there is room in the back to log the details of up to 50 batches of beer. If you want to put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support. Thanks very much to everybody who has done so already. Protect your precious beer with one of our growler bags. Very cool thing. This bag is essentially a cylindrical canvas-type cooler that is just the right size to accommodate a 64-ounce growler, or a couple of 22-ounce bombers, or 3 12-ounce bottles if you want to take homebrew to your homebrew club meeting. It has an adjustable strap so you can sling it over your shoulder. Check those out at basicbrewingshop.com as well. Limited number of those available. Gordon and I talked for a good long time, so I want to get right to it. But first, big news from Alabama. The legislation legalizing homebrewing in Alabama has passed the state Senate. That means there is only one hurdle to go for the last state in the nation to legalize our favorite hobby, and that is the governor's desk. Congratulations on the success so far, and let's hope that Governor Bentley signs it into law soon. And I just saw a tweet from Charlie Papazian right before I turned on the microphone that said that prohibitionists are mobilizing against this law, so they are asking the governor to veto it. So you get on the phone or Twitter or whatever you've been using to convince the senators so successfully, contact the governor politely and ask him to sign this law. Let's get this all done. Okay, let's talk to Gordon Strong. Gordon Strong, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thanks, James. Great to be back.
Is there anybody more qualified in the country to talk about competitions than you, Gordon Strong? Don't be modest.
I can do a credible job at it.
Now, give us your resume, some accolades. I mean, like I say, don't be modest. Give us some of your qualifications on the topic.
For competitions or for judging?
Well, both.
Competitions. 3 Ninkazis. I like to say I was 3 for 4. I entered the NHC 4 times and I won it 3 times. So I think, if Michael Jordan was good enough to hang it up after 3 in a row, I think that's good enough for me too. So
give somebody else a chance.
Yeah. Well, I used to say if Jamil stopped entering and, if I couldn't beat him anymore, it really wasn't worth it. But that's... I'm going to get email on that one. Just kidding. We trash talk each other like crazy. So, yeah. So I'd done well in a lot of competitions, but the NHC obviously is the one that I'm best known for.
And then on the judging side, you're not too shabby either.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of that. So I've been judging for about 16 years, and I'm the president of the BJCP and the highest ranking judge in the program.
So, like I said, you are the most qualified to for this topic. So and you've got your Brewing Better Beer, Master Lessons for Advanced Home Brewers. You've got a chapter. Chapter 9 is on competition brewing, and you give some advice on entering competitions and preparing your beers for competition. So why don't we just start there with some basic information, some basic tips for those who are wanting to enter competitions. Where's a good place to start?
Well, it depends on the size and the scope of the competition you're entering. I kind of advise people to sort of start small, get some competition experience before you try to enter something really big, because a lot of people just expect to, take some of their early beers and throw them into a huge competition and do well. It's possible, but I think it's better to sort of start smaller and more on a local and regional level, particularly if you can go and observe, volunteer to be a steward or something if you're not already a judge, to see what the competitions are all about. Because I think if you understand how your beers are going to be evaluated, if you sort of understand what the overall process is, you're kind of further along. Anytime anything you do is evaluated, it's best to know the standards against which you're going to be judged and the process that the people are going to follow. So, forewarned is forearmed. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I'm recommending is, do your homework, figure out what judging is all about and how the process works. And it's kind of easier to do that if you start on a smaller level, because people are less likely to be hectic and frenzied trying to get everything judged.
And there is a standard that the beers are judged against. It's not just the personal preference of the judges that just happen to be sitting around that table that has that flight with your beer in it, right?
Preferably, if it's a BJCP, HA BJCP sanctioned competition, then there's going to be standards. Normally, it's the BJCP style guidelines. Competitions don't have to use them; they just have to have published guidelines of some sort. For instance, we register the Great American Beer Festival and the World Beer Cup. Judges there get BJCP points, but they have their own set of guidelines. Kind of doesn't matter as long as the entrants and the judges both sort of know ahead of time what the published rules are. It doesn't much matter. But for the vast majority of competitions, the BJCP style guidelines are the reference that will be used.
And you could have an awesome beer, and if you enter it in the wrong category, you're going to get dinged.
Yes. Yeah, you'll be graded against how good a beer it is, but also how well it meets the style. So there's technical brewing considerations, but there's also, does it match the expectations of the style? And not every beer you make is going to fit neatly into one of the published styles. So you could just enter it as a specialty or experimental beer, and then it's kind of up to you to do a good job to describe it to the judges so that they have the right expectation when they taste it.
Talk about that too. I mean, you on the entry form, what are the judges looking for, and how can you help them?
Yeah. There, it's best to sort of put yourself in their shoes. Suppose somebody hands you a beer. If you're used to evaluating beers, I mean, you wouldn't just sort of take it and drink it. You'd look at them sort of expectantly, or actually ask them, so what is this? So you can sort of get in the right frame of mind. So imagine that for something that didn't have like a neat little shorthand. So I like to say, can you describe your beer in 1 to 2 sentences? Give me something to put my mind in the right frame to evaluate it. Tell me something about the flavors or the balance, or if it matches some historical style that just isn't in the guidelines. Give me something that I can go on. If you use special ingredients of some sort, go ahead and mention those. So there's where it kind of helps to think like a judge and have some judging experience, because once you judge that flight, or if you're sitting around and listening to people judge it, it'll be pretty clear what types of information are meaningful to a judge and which ones aren't. And you can't give them the recipe, essentially, so they won't ever see that. But you might be able to describe in general what the beer is like. You might just mention the alcohol strength, or the bittering level, just the overall kind of balance, because then the judges will go look for that. And then on any kind of specialty beer, they will apply certain hedonistic criteria. Basically, does it work? Because that's really all they have to go on at that point.
Could you set yourself up? I mean, if you don't tell them what special ingredients are in there, I mean, I guess there are specialty ingredients that you could put in a beer that might be flagged as an off flavor or a
Sure.
defect.
Absolutely. Suppose suppose you made an Orval clone, for instance, and you just entered it and said, this is a Belgian specialty beer, but didn't really say anything about it. If you didn't know what Brettanomyces tasted like, you would think something horribly went wrong with the beer.
Yeah.
As opposed to it sort of being intentionally wonderful. So, that's kind of an extreme example, because I think a lot of people would, in that category, if given a Orval clone, they would figure it out. But, imagine somebody that wasn't familiar with Belgian beers and yet got stuck in that position. How would you describe Orval to somebody that's never had an Orval, for instance?
Chris from Twitter asks, what styles would you recommend to a homebrewer who has never entered a competition? So what are the there are some, like the IPA categories, that are just overly crowded with entries. What categories would you recommend a newbie enter?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily shy away from IPA if you think you made a good one. But that's the other reason why you might want to enter more local competitions or more club level competitions that don't have 80 entries in one category. As long as the judges are able to give it a fair shake, if they don't have some excessive number that they're rushing through, I think you could enter just about anything. It depends on the level of the competition. If they're known for having good judges, then I think you could really submit just about anything. Like my Orval example a minute ago, you could make a wonderful one of those, but if none of the judges at the competition where you're submitting it knows what that is, you're unlikely to get a good evaluation. So I would actually stick to more mainstream styles. Don't do anything really random. Go for pale ales and brown ales and porters and things like that. Something that people should understand. Any kind of judge would understand what those are without getting into some of the more obscure styles. So you're more likely to get decent feedback because I think more judges are going to be able to handle it. The more accessible styles, the less extreme styles, the people, sometimes early, beginning judges are like the beer drinking population in general. They might like some styles and not like other styles. Being able to judge all the styles competently is more of an advanced judging skill.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just sort of think about the general craft beer drinking population, try to come up with something that the majority of them would like to drink. So if you think of it more like if you're sending it to a beer festival than a beer competition, what would be a kind of a people's choice kind of a beer? Then that might tell you where you can get like a decent evaluation. But I would also just say, if you think you made a really great example of any style, submit it.
And you talk about timing in the book.
Oh yeah,
it's all about timing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Because beers have certain lifetimes to them. So, some of the longer discussions in my book are about, how to maintain the peak lifetime of your beers, so that you can have more of them ready for a given competition. A lot of the strategies I was using in the book were things that make the most sense for something like the NHC. So what time of year it's going to happen. How far in advance you have to start. If you know when your beers peak, you can sort of back up from them and decide when you need to brew them. And you can also store your beers appropriately so that they're more likely to be in their best condition when the competition rolls around. But if you're just talking about competitions in general, I approach those kind of differently than the NHC. Then I would be looking for whatever seemed to be in the best condition at the time, and enter that rather than just whatever I happen to have lying around. Because, particularly if you keg beers and you have a lot of kegs, some of them, tend to get a little old and you're thinking, should I bottle this off? Should I just take this to some party where people will finish it? Do I dump it? How badly do I need this keg? So, those aren't the best beers to enter in a competition. But, but you might be able to do something fun with them, because sometimes some of those beers are things that I would blend together to see if I come up with something else that's interesting. But whether you come up with something that is worth putting into a competition kind of turns on whether you're able to sort of evaluate your own beer against those guidelines. If you mix something up, is that a credible, name your style?
Mm-hmm.
Did you just make a good Belgian pale ale or something by mixing a couple of other things together? Is there some way that you could describe this that a judge would give it a good score? If so, you could send that in too.
So if you're in a competition, say like the NHC, that has more than one round, do you plan to rebrew?
Oh, for some styles, definitely. One of the beers that I got a gold medal in the second round was a Hefeweizen, and that thing was like 2 or 3 weeks old when it was judged for the finals, because I definitely rebrewed that. If you're making something that's not high gravity and happens to be pale, almost anything like that would benefit from rebrewing, because they just don't last. If you're doing something with a lot of fresh hop character, you might want to see if a fresher version will stand up. And if you have the one that won and your latest batch, you can always compare them side by side, and send the best one, or you might try throwing a splash of one into the other and see if that helps. I mean, one of the one of the other tricks that I would do is on something like a barley wine. You can get this wonderful aged flavor from barley wines that are, several years old. So I think I had one that was maybe 6 or 7 years old, an English barley wine, and it just had a beautiful malt character. But I thought some of the late hops had, fallen off. So, put in a splash of a 1-year-old, and that kind of brightened it up while maintaining that, that great malt character. So, I mean, that's kind of an example of, extending the useful lifetime of your beers so that they're the beer that you remembered for a longer period of time, and that time includes when the competition is taking place.
Let's switch gears and talk about judging. If someone wants to start judging, how do they get their feet wet?
Well, go to www.bjcp.org and look at the competition calendar and find one near you. On average, there's more than one a day. I think last year we had something like 450 registered competitions. So,
wow.
Literally more than one a day for the year. So, I mean, on any given weekend, there's going to be something, whether it's in your area or not. I live in Southwest Ohio, and I can go to a dozen competitions a year without driving more than an hour and a half. If I'm willing to drive 4 hours, I can hit 18 easily. So, there are opportunities out there. So I just say, get involved with a local homebrew club and see if they run any competitions. A lot of times the local clubs will also offer judge training, people that might be practicing, preparing to take the BJCP exam. But, you don't have to jump in and become a judge right away. I mean, you should try to get some practical experience. So if you show up and you've never done that before, the easiest thing you can do is volunteer to steward at a competition. You'll help get the beers and manage the paperwork, but you'll also get to listen to the judges deliberate. And if you tell them that you're a judge in training, they'll probably let you sample along with them so that, you can ask questions, when they're finished judging and, get that sort of firsthand training that you need, because it is a practical skill. I mean, you can read a book on what diastol's like, but if somebody hands you a beer that has it and said, "That's it, remember that," then you have that flavor, that aroma memory, because that's what you're going to recall.
The first time I tasted diastol in a beer, I didn't know what it was. And Steve Wilkes and I were sitting around tasting this beer saying, "What is that? What is that?" And finally he said butterscotch. Mm-hmm. And I said, "That's exactly what that is." But, if you're drinking a beer and it has
movie popcorn.
Exactly. If you haven't experienced that flavor in connection with that beverage, it takes a while for the brain to kind of wire itself in that way.
Right, because all the other flavors of a beer are going to be there. So, even if you sort of know what a pure flavor or a pure fault are like, they'll present differently when they're mixed in with a beer, and a beer could have multiple things wrong with it too. So, those faults could be present, and they could mask each other. One of the more interesting things to talk about in beer is something that happens most frequently in homebrew is oxidation, and people might say, well, it's kind of like papery or wet cardboard. Well, certain kinds of oxidation are, but you almost never get those. I mean, maybe you used to, but not anymore. Now you just get the things that are more like staleness. So, lighter colored beers will tend to be, they'll start picking up honey kind of flavor. Amber beers will get sort of more caramely and maybe more fruity for a while. Bitterness might get a little harsher. flavors that used to pop might just seem a little duller. Um, it's not like, gee, you have cardboard or you don't. Um, these things can be pretty complicated. So it's good to be able to judge them around, or at least perceive them around other people, where you can ask and say, try this. What are you getting?
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Because
Michael,
once somebody tells you, then you remember.
Michael McAllister on Twitter asks, what are the keys to keeping your palate fresh while judging?
Yeah, I saw that one. You think I'd have a better answer? Part of it is, I was thinking about that. When I go to judge, sometimes I'll ask to not be put on palate killing flights. Don't give me a flight of IPAs followed by a flight of imperial stouts or something, and then expect me to judge best of show. Because usually I'm trying to maintain for as many sessions as possible. So, don't get multiple flights of palate-killing beers. Don't take huge samples. I mean, you should be able to judge a beer in an ounce or two size. And if a beer's not, you don't have to finish what's in your glass. You just take enough to judge the beer and pour the rest out. Take some water in between, and if you get something that's pretty bad, have some crackers or bread, something that's not too strongly flavored, but just something to kind of reset your palate. And if you need to get up and walk around and just take a little bit of a break, you can do that too, because usually your senses recharge over time. If you're not continually assaulting them. So if you feel yourself sort of getting a little fatigued from a sensory perspective, just slow down, or take a little break. So, pace yourself. It's a quantity of stimulation in a certain period of time. So, just think about how you're using your palate. That instrument gets used up.
I've only judged a couple of competitions, but I found that it was easier to write comments on a flawed beer than it was to write comments on a good beer. Do you find that? I mean, there's only so many things that you can say about, yeah, this is good. But if there are obvious flaws, it seems like it's easier to pick those and to give some feedback on that.
Yeah, I think that's common with a lot of judges, through sort of moderate skill levels. One of the things that we try to teach in the BJCP is the whole notion of a structured evaluation of the beer. That can you give a full sensory description before you talk about whether what you're perceiving is good or bad? Can you identify and quantify everything that it is that you're perceiving? So you can actually fill up the bulk of your score sheet with just those kind of observations. And if you look at the score sheet, the BJCP score sheet, it's broken into sections. It has like aroma, appearance, flavor, mouthfeel, those things. And there's little prompters under them saying, consider these things. So, even if you're not kind of thinking about it at the time, you can look on the sheet and say, oh, maybe I ought to say something about that. Do I get any hops in this beer? Are there any aroma hops? One of the things that you can do is, even in a beer, suppose that it's the Hefeweizen I mentioned a minute ago. I mean, I wouldn't expect to get aroma hops in that, but you can write down no hops under the aroma section, meaning that you went looking for it and didn't find it. And that's a piece of information, not just you were silent on it, which means, maybe they were there, maybe they weren't. Maybe you didn't even think about it. So, you can write down things like that too. If the style requires, if the style has certain characteristics that uniquely identify it. If you're doing like a dry stout, does it have that, coffee-like roasted barley flavor? If for some reason it doesn't have that, you can be commenting on, hey, there's this thing that the style usually has, but, I'm not getting it. Then you can start talking about whether these things are good or bad.
And you've got to remember, if you're judging, that there is a brewer who made this beer, good or bad, who is wanting your feedback, and you kind of owe it to the brewer to take some thought, take some time, and really do as much as you can to describe the beer and help them out.
Yeah, in the early days of home brewing and early AHA days, the emphasis was more on the feedback because it was part of, hey, we all have to teach each other how to brew. Now there's kind of so much information out there. The quality of the average beer is so much better than it was when I first started out in the hobby, and the information sources on the internet and elsewhere, the books that are published, certainly have much more information. So I think people are much more able to diagnose their problems if you can tell them what you perceive. A lot of times the problem isn't on the diagnostic end, it's on the perception end. They want to know, what did you get? And how do you think that matches up against the style? And not so much, I think you ought to mash like 2 degrees higher or something. Because to do a good job at the feedback, you really need to know something about the recipe. And I kind of think it's the height of arrogance to, say, just because I'm a judge, I knew what you did. I mean, you might have a guess at what they did, but believe me, as somebody that gets sheets back, people are mentioning things all the time to me that I didn't do. So, gee, that would be a nice thing to fix, if I did anything like that, but I didn't. So, thanks for the wasted space. So I think it's much more valuable to actually focus on giving somebody a complete sensory read of the beer, and then kind of talk about, based on what you perceived, are any of those things false, or are any of those things, hurting the style impression? If you can kind of identify what's keeping the beer from getting a higher score, then I think nowadays the brewers are more able to take that information and go find out what they can do, given that they have a recipe in hand.
There's this thing called Google nowadays that...
Yeah. It's kind of entertaining when somebody asks you a dumb question. I don't know if you've seen the site, Let Me Google That for you.
Yes.
So, you can send them a link.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, Andy Sparks sent that to me. Thank you very much.
It's really hard to use in a joking way because it comes off as really condescending, but
yeah,
it's the kind of thing you write it for yourself and then you don't send it.
Yeah, I'm used to that kind of treatment from Andy, so
Yeah, good help's hard to find.
Let's jump into some sort of more random questions.
Sure.
Jamie Barlow asks, what do you think about the new cap for entries in the National Homebrew Competition? How does that change the Ninkasi?
I hate it. I think the competition should do something to be able to handle the demand. Certainly there are judges out there. They need to get them to show up. So I don't know what the issues are at the sites, or whether Some of the sites can't handle the number of entries that they see. But I don't know. When I was entering the NHC, they started some of those things. They started putting in the site limits. They hadn't put in limits on individual brewers, but also I don't remember. Maybe one of the years things sold out, but it took a long time. I guess I don't like people not having access to the competition. So,
I mean, in the years when you won, how many beers did you enter?
Between 30 and upper 40s, I think.
Wow.
And, but I make mead too, and I would typically enter like just about all the mead categories and have a couple of ciders as well. So, usually it was in the, no more than the low to mid 30s of beers.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to have around.
You're just trying to get it out of the house.
Well, yeah, some of those would be fresh beers. Some of those would be, the things that I would call archive beers, the bigger ones that you've got tucked away for competition. Some of those would be blends. I would make a fruit beer by adding, some fruit thing to some other thing that I had. You could come up and do things like that. So, I think with the new rule, if I was entering now, I think I would have to think very, very hard about which were the best beers that I had. Because before I didn't really have to do that. Mm-hmm. I just said, do I think this fits the style? Does this have a chance? And then you send it in because judging's kind of subjective, and you never know who you're going to get and what they're feeling like that day. So, roll the dice. Mm-hmm. But now, you have to be much more selective. And but then when the random chance hits, I mean, suppose you get some newbie judges, or suppose something was mishandled, or suppose all sorts of things. If your best beers don't get a fair shake, then you have some really small number of them. So I used to enter more beers because it kind of eliminated the randomness. I would make sure that I had something in there.
Jim Cheney and Nick Rodimer asked sort of similar questions. Nick's question is, do you think adding some new categories is overdue? I know many judges have lamented that Category 23 has become dominated by a few styles, such as the Black IPA or Imperial Red, which are by themselves considered styles by the Brewers Association.
Oh, yeah, the Brewers Association has 789 styles. But, yes, we are overdue for an update to the style guidelines. That is true. The reason why we haven't had one recently is we did this major revamping of the exam program. We went to the online introductory exam, and then basing the first two ranks on a tasting only exam. So when we did that, a lot of the questions that are on the online exam came from the style guidelines. So we wanted to leave things sort of alone for a little while to see how the new exams were working out before we, sort of caused us to have to go through and generate, 8,000 questions, literally, for that kind of an exam. It took a long time before. So, I mean, what we have been doing is we've been collecting, as people have made submissions and changes, recommendations, we've been collecting them, and we've been making our own notes. I'm not exactly sure when we're going to jump into that. I'm hoping maybe next year. We should be able to do something more serious, since the new exam program has been out for a year and seems to be working okay. So we can probably start thinking about making a move on some of those other ones. But yeah, it's kind of hard to. I used to like judging the specialty and experimental category. But now if somebody says, do you want to judge that? Say, yeah, but I don't want to judge rye beers and I don't want to judge black IPAs. I'll judge whatever's left. And see if they take me up on it.
Well, Peter Simons asks, what's the best approach to judging the Category 23 section? I mean, it's like a best of show in itself, right?
Yeah, and there's where you kind of go back to the statement I made before on entering that category. Every one of those should have some accompanying description. I mean, if you made a black IPA, you just put down black IPA, and people should know what that means. Whether they want to argue about the name of the style or not, I could care less. It's, black IPA, people know what that means. So, if it's something like that, people should be able to judge them. Otherwise, you need that concept around it to explain to the judges. But when I judge those styles, you kind of have to look. You go through the list of the beers and you look about what's special about them, and then the first thing I'll do is I'll sort them. So you want like a pull list, a list of the order that they'll be presented. And people might ask, well, what criteria do you use? Is it alcohol strength? Is it IBUs? Is it some other flavor? And the answer is basically yes. The phrase I use is palate impact. So, all things considered, what's likely to beat up your palate more should be judged later. So, it could be a pale 20 IBU beer, but suppose it has habaneros in it or something. That would still kill your palate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, you really think about the order that you're judging them, and then you see if you have the information necessary to judge them. I like to read through and see, are there any that seem to have insufficient information, and if there are, I get the steward to go get the organizer or the judge director or whoever has access to the entry data, and say, do you have any more information here? Is there something else that you can tell me about this beer? And it's kind of helpful if one of those guys is a decent judge, because they should know what that means. It's part of, do you have enough information to judge this thing, or are you just going to guess wildly at it?
Mm-hmm.
So you try to get them to come back and fill in the blanks for you. And then you just go and you judge the beer. For specialty type beers that aren't like a defined style. I mean, even if it's not a published style, black IPA, people are going to know what to expect. But on something else, I go back to something that somebody told me when I was first starting judging, is how to judge these things. You separate them into the sucks, doesn't suck pile. You have that rough ordering, and I try to I just say it's somewhat hedonistic. Does it work? Is it balanced? Is whatever concept they had sound? Does it seem like it's well brewed? You try to apply those criteria. Is it something that's interesting? Could you drink this? More than just the sample size you have. if somebody gave you a pint of it or whatever the appropriate serving size is, would you want to go have one of those? So I think you kind of fall back on those because you don't have the normal style descriptions there. So you're looking for basically, does it work? Is it what they say it is, and is it a good idea?
Mm-hmm.
So that tends to be how I go about doing it. Was that Peter Simons from Australia?
Yes.
Good mate of mine. So looking forward to seeing him. When I went to Australia, he actually I stayed with him and drove from Sydney to Melbourne to their version of the NHC. So
yeah, he's nothing but trouble.
I know. That's why I had so much fun.
Michael Patterson says, I've been blending my beer using 2-liter bottles and a carbonation cap inspired by you. You mentioned that you were able to bottle from the 2-liter bottle. I'm having a tough time getting enough and consistent carbonation. Can you elaborate on how you bottle these blends? So you talk about that a bit in the book.
Yes, that is the that is the technique. I like using the 2-liter bottles because it lets you make sort of final adjustments. Well, usually I use the 2-liter bottle if I was doing something for the NHC, something where I need 3 bottles. If I only needed 1 bottle, I'd probably use a 1-liter bottle. But something that has enough volume plus extra, because you're going to want to taste it. So, I mean, before I put it into the bottle, I would always taste it until I was happy with what I would be presented as a judge. But to directly answer the question, what I would do is, once I had it in the condition that I wanted it, I would chill it down to near freezing. I would put it in my lagering fridge, and I would also have the bottles I was going to pour it into in the same fridge, so that the beer and the bottles are all at the same temperature and that temperature is cold. So the key thing about having it near freezing is that you're sort of relying on the solubility of CO2 being higher at lower temperatures. So if you're bottling it at a lower temperature than it's going to be served, then you're more likely to have more of the CO2 stay in there. I would also tend to jack up the carbonation a little bit higher than I wanted it, knowing that there would be some loss during that process. But, if you're trying to get a feel for that, bottle one up, leave it alone for a week, come back and get it, try it at like a good serving temperature, and see, is that what you wanted? And then kind of adjust your routine from there. It's really, there's no formula. I wasn't really taking any measurements except using my palate. So that's the basics. There's the technique, the thing that needed pictures in the book. They didn't let me do any pictures or diagrams because I guess I didn't realize that I had to have all those things in when I submitted the manuscript. I thought I could do them afterwards, but now I know. That would have been great to have a 3-panel set of pictures that sort of showed what I was talking about. But
that's
basically,
for the second edition.
Yeah, I wish. They actually, they did a reprint, but I guess that's different than a second edition. So I'm right-handed, so I would have the 2-liter bottle in my right hand. I would have the glass bottle in my left hand. I would hold the glass bottle at a 45-degree angle. I would pop the carbonator cap gently, and then with just the lip of the 2-liter bottle resting on the lip of the bottle, I would gently pour it so that the beer was going straight down the side. and I would be doing it in some place that had enough light that I could sort of see what was going on in the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Because you want to be able to watch it as it fills, and you want to watch it to see if you're kicking up too much carbonation along the way. If it's foaming too much. Because if it is, there are things you can do too. So, but if everything goes well, basically you pour it down the side of the bottle very gently, so you're not kicking up a lot of foam in the bottle, and then right before you get to the the appropriate fill level, you hold the glass bottle straight up, so you're pouring into it. So you kick up some foam because you want to cap on foam, because that drives out the remaining oxygen in the bottle, and then leaves you with a decent headspace that judges seem to think you need. I mean, I've bottled this way before and had the fill be too high, and they're like writing, "High fill, this can't possibly be carbonated correctly." As if I was like bottle conditioning it or something. So people just make stuff up.
Couldn't they just taste it and see if it's carbonated correctly?
Well, yeah, some judges look for excuses not to judge your beer, and then use that as a substitute for the experience. So don't give them that opportunity. Give them a good-looking bottle. So basically that's how I would do it. If it was foaming too much, then I would kind of pretend I was in, a crappy bar with a person that doesn't know how to pour beer. You just basically keep pouring, and the liquid eventually sort of pushes the foam out of the way enough. I should mention you should do this over a sink. Then, just get it to the right level so you can then cap it, and then you can wash the bottle. But that's kind of the more extreme approach, because you're going to waste some. But not all beers will cooperate with you the same. So that's kind of what I would do. I mean, back in the day, before I kegged, I bottled everything. That's when a batch of beer took 2 hours to process rather than 10 minutes. And I had great results then. I loved my bottle conditioned beers with all my bottles that I had to, label and deal with. But, if you thought about what I was doing at the NHC, and I was only generally doing this for the NHC, I wasn't bottling, I wasn't trying to get 50 bottles of one beer. I was trying to get one bottle of 50 different beers. Mm-hmm. So the normal approach just wasn't working for me, because I didn't want to bottle all those beers, and I didn't want to set up like a beer gun to bottle, because I'd have to clean the stupid thing in between every one. It just seemed like a whole lot of overhead to get 1 or 3 bottles. So I came up with this as a way for me to get beer into the bottle, and also have me be able to taste it and fix it if there was some issue with it. Because sometimes if the carbonation wasn't exactly right, I could fix it in that bottle and not have to worry about, fully carbonating the whole keg. Or if the beer was a little cloudy, I could fine it in the bottle. Some of these were things that I developed as mead techniques, but found that they could apply just as well to beer.
Let's do one more question.
Yep.
And there are a ton of questions that we didn't get to, but people can go to basicbrewing.com, or facebook.com/basicbrewing. Too many URLs nowadays, and see all the questions. And unfortunately, you're not a Facebooker, so we need to get you on.
Otherwise,
we need to get you to drain your life away like the rest of us, looking at Facebook. But
trying to write books and things.
spending your time wisely. Shame on you. Pat Rasmus asks, due to the high volume of IPAs submitted, what qualities do you use as the basis of your judgment? For instance, what IPAs in the past have really caught your attention and why? Or is that kind of a moving target?
Yeah, and here's where sort of personal preference jumps in, and it's kind of tough when you judge IPAs. That's one where palates can get blown out. So it depends on where your beer is in the flight. If it's early on, you can give somebody something more normal. If it's going to be judged late in the flight, you kind of have to go big because, like the guy that just got out of the rock concert, if you want him to hear you, you better be shouting. So, but me personally, I prefer my IPAs to be to have a very clean bitterness. I'm big on the quality of the bitterness. I'm looking for something that is bitter but not harsh. So that is kind of very important to me. I don't like my IPAs to have too much crystal malt in them. I think it kind of muddies the flavor and tends to clash. So I'm looking for clean flavors. I mean, there's certain hop varieties that I object to, and again, that's more me. I mean, whoever came up with the idea for Summit hops, I want to take them out back and shoot them. It's like it's a hop that tastes like garlic and feet. I don't know why anybody would want that in their beer, but yet people push that on me. So I'm looking for sort of clean, pure hop flavors, things that aren't overly resinous. Some people kind of like that character. So I'm trying to avoid things that people describe as dank. I'm trying to avoid things that are overly piney, because I find those to be the real resinous types. Lately, I've been going more for IPAs that have more of a fruitier quality, like a kind of a squishy fruit. I like the Amarillo hops that have like a peach character. I like the Australian Galaxy hops that have a passion fruit character. I think those are interesting. I think citrus is nice as long as it doesn't come off as too acidic. Mm-hmm. So generally, I'm looking for something that can throw a lot of hops at me, but still be really drinkable. So I don't want it to be overly boozy. I don't want it to be overly sweet. I think it's important to have a dry finish. It doesn't have to be bone dry, but again, this is where I think crystal malts get in the way. So personally, when I make an IPA, I'm shooting for something around 7% and maybe 60 IBUs. And I tend to use a lot of late hopping in my beers, so that I tend to avoid 60-minute additions. When I make IPAs, use first wort hopping and late hopping to get a smoother character. So I mean that's kind of, I've made a lot of different IPAs. I've been working on recipes lately, and they all seem to have about that same kind of balance. And then I look for commercial beers that have something like that, and I don't know if I'm doing this consciously or not, but I think I'm basically describing something similar to like a Bell's Two-Hearted Ale.
Oh, yeah.
It's just delicious.
Yeah, that's a good beer.
So things that taste like that. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's like this revolt going on the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest now. No, they have to be over the top. Like, okay. I'm looking for something a little bit more balanced. So that's kind of what I look for, but but I'm not the one who's likely judging your IPAs because I'm avoiding the palate busting flights. So who knows who's going to be there? It's a really tough question. So I think if you have something that has, in general, in any style, something that has clean, pure flavors, that has a clean fermentation character, I think is going to put you ahead of the game, because those kind of beers tend to stand out from a technical standpoint. And even if there is some sort of style issue, judges are going to likely advance them anyway because they just show good brewing skill. So, when in doubt, make good beer.
Now that's a good line to close on. When in doubt, make good beer.
Mm-hmm. I'll stand on that.
There you go. Well, Gordon, this has been a lot of fun, and I will probably see you in less than 2 months now.
Yeah, Philly, baby. That was, part of the brewing this weekend was for beers to take there. So, I'm giving 2 talks there. I'm doing one on Brewing Better Beer practical applications. So, talking about favorite tips and techniques from the book that people liked, that people had reported back, and then showing some new recipes that aren't in the book, how to apply those techniques. So that's one talk, and I kind of got roped into doing another one that has to do with mead and how you take a finished mead and do the final adjustments to bring it into something that's going to do better in a competition, do better for something you want to drink. So some of those apply to beer too. So I'm really looking for the NHC is really kind of the social event of the year. Yeah. So
no, it's not. It's work.
Well,
shh, it's work.
Yes. Well, it's if that's your work, this is the kind of job I want.
All right. Well, thanks, Gordon.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Always enjoy it.
Well, thanks again to Gordon, and thanks to everybody on Twitter and Facebook for all the questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them. We are greatly looking forward to Philly and seeing Gordon in person. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Our new Basic Brewing growler bags are available in our shop. Protect your precious homebrew and craft beer as you take it from place to place, especially as the weather warms up this season in the Northern Hemisphere. Check out our new support link where you can throw a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to our podcast. Be sure to check out our DVDs, as always: Basic Brewing, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site. And we do have combo deals to save you a few bucks on our site, along with our shirts, too. Our Brewer's Logbooks are on the store as well. Keep track of up to 50 batches of beer. And you can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We greatly appreciate the support. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are The True Adventures of the World's Greatest Stuntman, My Life as Indiana Jones, James Bond, Superman, and Other Movie Heroes, and Hoover Floormate Spin Scrub Wet Dry Vacuum. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget, you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to BYO Magazine through the associated links on basicbrewing.com. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.